Hi, it's Corinne from My Chemical Free House. Topic of today's video is doing mold avoidance when you hardly have any money at all. So very little money, almost no money, or living off disability, or living off very, very little welfare. This is a really big challenge, of course, that comes up in the groups. I'm going to cover a few topics, places to stay for free, cheaper places to live, work trade options, and then a couple other things I want to mention are, I can't lean forward too much or it'll look like I'm not wearing anything. A couple other things I want to mention then are the goal of really getting back to earning money as quickly as you can if you really don't have hardly anything, and other ways to earn income that aren't working, and how I was able to travel without paying very much at all. Like my trip to Cuba was pretty much a break-even trip. All right, so the first is, and I also want to encourage people that, like, there are a few people that have done this off very little money, and they don't often say that in the groups. You kind of have to follow them over time, and those, you might see some of their struggles online, or maybe you know them personally. Of course, I know a few people personally, at least 3 people that have done this off very, very little money. Some have gotten fully better, some are still in avoidance, still working at it, finding a way. So it's not a good idea to start with just looking at the groups and thinking, oh, well, they have so much money, they're buying a really nice RV, or that person's able to work, or that person has a spouse or something, because there are a lot of people without those things. There was I don't want to get into the really long story, but I did start with the sale of my condo, and then I lost everything from the mistakes that my builder made, and I started with zero. And no family support, no spouse or partner. There's many other people that can't afford an expensive RV. There's many other people like in the same situation, like in really hard situations. And I know that not everyone makes it, and I know that it's not just you can make it through anything. There is some luck involved, hope and a prayer sometimes, but these are some ways. Okay. All right. So free places to stay, of course, are in a vehicle. People move around, they park in different places, they may even know the police or in the area and speak to the police, and so they know what they're doing, and find free places to park. It could be the BLM land where you can camp or park for free. You can ask your friends and family. I know many of us have been abandoned by our family. I am one of those that was abandoned by almost all of my family, so I understand. But ask everyone all your Facebook friends, maybe not every single one, but ask the people who are still there for you if you can camp in their yard for a bit, if they don't have a moldy house, or if they have a larger property that's further away from a moldy house. That's somewhere to stay for free. So some of the people that are living out of their vehicles, they have different situations of maybe where they're showering and using the bathroom. Like it could even be a homeless shelter at times. It could be a gym where they do have to pay for the gym membership. Most people do have at least the disability payment or disability pension, and or it could be more of a camping situation where they're showering outside and using a little compost bucket for the bathroom. So that is places to stay for free. Then there are places to stay that are cheaper, and what I'm thinking of here is actually usually going into a country that's less expensive. So there are at least 3 mold avoiders right now in Mexico, or 3 people who had chronic, or I guess still have chronic fatigue syndrome or similar. Actually, one totally recovered. and the other two are getting by because it's just a much less expensive country. You can get a much more affordable apartment or room in a house, or even like set up your build a tiny little hut, on someone's property, and obviously you're going to be paying them some rent, but it's going to be very little compared to the US and Canada and Western Europe. So there's places like that. Mexico's not the only option. It's just the best known, closest to the US, the most familiar. There are other options and pretty good locations effect too. In parts of Mexico, not perfect, but that can be a trade-off there sometimes. So that's living somewhere less expensive. Then there is work trade options. So there's a lot of places you can stay for free if you're able to work. I know obviously many people aren't, but if you are able to do physical labor, and maybe a brain fog, but you're able to do physical labor, it's usually I think 4 or 5 hours a day for many of these work trade sites. Then you would do that in exchange for staying there. Sometimes, I mentioned in another video, it can be online. The work trade could be online, that you would stay there for free. And those often include food. So it may be like 5 hours a day. That can include food and free housing. Of course, you have to pay for your transportation, medication, etc. But a lot can be provided in some of those work trades if you're well enough there. Not everybody is. All right, so those are the places to stay, and that's obviously one of the biggest parts of rent. Food, it's hard to get by. I mean, some people do grow their own food. Some people do go to food banks, but that's not usually good quality food. So usually if someone has a disability check, or if someone has a little bit of help from their family or alimony or anything, it's probably going a lot to food and medication. So checking out the rent is usually the easiest part to take out, unless you have somebody willing to offer you food. All right, so those are the places to stay. And then the fourth thing I was going to talk about was getting back to work as quickly as you can. So, of course, there's the physical labor, and that could be done. You could get into that by trying a work trade, because there's not much commitment there. You can actually usually pretty much leave at any time if it's not working for you. And then usually the other option is going to be online work, because that you would get paid for, not in a work trade. So anything that you have skills in online that you can just do a little bit here and there, even just doing a little bit of something that you have some skills in, or you're learning a new thing like drop shipping or selling on Amazon, or any number of things. Of course, a fundraiser is an option for many. I know many who are doing really poorly don't have those connections to really raise much money, but usually you're going to raise some money. It's a lot of work too, but usually you're going to get a little bit of help that way. A fundraiser should be definitely at the top of your list of something to do if you're really starting with nothing, especially if you need it to buy your vehicle or your van or whatever you're going to camp in. And you should see the interview with Solona. She does have a job, but her ambulance, that's like a ambulance camper, is just incredible, because I think she said it was around $9,000, which for a vehicle that's totally insulated and are really mold proof, and wired for electricity, it's a really good deal. So finding those kind of good deals on a van, or the ambulance, which is so smart because it's not usually a high demand vehicle, that was sold by the government here in BC, Canada. So that was a really excellent way to get a home. And so some people might have to do a fundraiser, obviously, for something like that, but have like a really clear goal that people can help with, that can really help. with the fundraiser. And the one thing that people don't, I don't think I've seen anyone talk about online, for obvious reasons, is that people do live off credit cards, of course, in the hopes of getting better and getting out of that. Nobody wants to go into debt. Nobody's planning that out, but it's probably better than doing nothing. The goal is really to get better, get a lot better. Even if you don't get 100% better, if you can work, if you can get back some stability, then you're going to be back on your feet. So you're aiming to work as your main goal. Probably not full time anytime soon, but you're aiming to do some work that produces income as soon as you possibly can as your first goal when you're really going into this with no money, unless you see a really clear way to getting better by borrowing or by using fundraiser money, and which has happened. I've seen people get better in extraordinary circumstances. The most extraordinary case was in the mountains of Western Europe, someone that doesn't want to be named right now. But if you know her case from the groups, it's just extraordinary story. And in these circumstances, I have to say there's luck involved, but this person really used her instincts to pick up on those few things, because when you're really low in money, you've got to pick the few things. Treatments really is what I'm talking about. You've got to pick those few key things that are going to get you there, going to give you a big improvement. And a lot of people have to use intuition to find out what's the best for them, because there's obviously no clear treatment. We don't know. Everyone's different with binders and supplements, chelation. Everyone's so different in terms of that thing that's going to give them the boost. Obviously, some have gotten better without treatments, but most people do treatments, so it's more unusual not to. All right, so the very last thing, this is going to be a shorter video for me. I usually talk way too long. The very last thing, last thing was how I traveled on very little money there. So I'll just take the Cuba trip as an example. It wasn't the only one, but what I did there was I saved air miles, and I know that differs by country, the types of points that you get, but here we have what's called air miles. You collect them on your credit card, and you can get special deals. So you get, when you sign up for certain credit cards, you can get and this is in the US too, the points have different names. I've seen one in the US that would have covered 2 or 3 flights to the Caribbean from the US just by signing up for that credit card. And you have to spend a certain amount in the first few months, and then you get the points. Usually that's how it works. So you collect points, and then when you use the credit card on other purchases, you get points. But the really big boost is from the signups. And often you can use those points on hotels. So maybe you don't want to travel anywhere right now, you don't want to fly, or you can't fly. Use that for emergency hotels. Sometimes you can use it on car rentals, so use that for if you need a car to go camping or to go somewhere. And then what I did was, I went to Cuba for a reason, because it's a very inexpensive country, and the rent was no more than what I was already paying. For some people, you might, if you do have a place, you could sublet that or rent it out if you owned it, and use that money to rent a place in a cheaper country. And it's also a very safe country in terms of physical safety and health risks, no ticks or not really much mosquito-borne illness. So it was a very safe place to go. And of course, food was way cheaper, so I saved a lot of money on food. Food was way cheaper. So overall, in Cuba, I kind of broke even. So that was my strategy of traveling. From there, I went to stay where I could stay for free. A friend allowed me to stay camp for free. And from there, I went to a family member's place that I tried indoors. It was moldy, it didn't really work out, but that was an option of trying something to stay for free. Ended up, at a campsite, and then a B&B ended up costing more than I had hoped, but can never really count on an indoor space to be good for sure. All right, so those are some tips. I still collect the air miles, and that's usually what I use for flights. Of course, there you can get into really like finding the good deals or really, really good deals on flights at times. One trick is like going through Miami. I know Miami's horrible. That's why I had to camp outside of Miami for a couple nights. Flights through Miami are super cheap to get to the Caribbean, where you could get some really good locations effect there. So you've got to find your way to Miami first. Hopefully that's not where you're starting from, or if it is, that's good, get out of there. So you can find those deals. So you can find those hotel deals even too, although hotel deals usually not the best hotels in terms of mold. Be careful with that, but you can get the flight deals there when you look for them. All right, that is it for now. This will be part of the mold avoidance series. I talked about camping for those who can't camp. I talked about females camping alone, and I'm hoping to do a video on the little shelter if I can learn how to do video editing. Not sure how to do that. I do have a post on the shelter, a blog post, because that's a really inexpensive, about $700 US for a little shelter, which could even definitely be simplified from there, but mine was like made for strong winds and snow loads and stuff, and made for super cold weather. It would also work well in hot weather to kind of moderate the temperature there, because insulation helps with both heat and cold, obviously. So I can link to that and my post on camping. But yeah, I'd like to talk more about the shelter, because that's the kind of thing like you could build somewhere like Mexico, and maybe the materials might be different there, and you might not need that much insulation. Parts of Mexico really have good weather a lot of the year. So, but those are some good things to have like in your tool belt, to know how to set up really simple living situations, simple shelters, because you need those skills. Like that's the kind of missing piece sometimes too, like luck, intuition, the kindness of strangers or friends or family, and also the ability to problem solve difficult situations. So get some help with problem solving too, if you really just cannot figure out where you could possibly go and how you're possibly going to make it happen. All right, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.